So now that we have this little forest area, I think I want to maybe try adding some stuff in here a little bit. I know we've got it looking pretty good, from a visual standpoint here. But let's maybe add an event. And it doesn't even have to be anything important. It could just be some scenery or something. So let's just click, let's just do right here. Right click on that. And we'll do new event. Now what we're going to do is we'll go to image. And I'm going to maybe put a critter or something here. So we got this nature option here. And we can see we've got dog, cat, chicken, like rooster, whatever. There's a horse. And then we've got all these, I don't know why these are in the nature tab, but I guess they're supposed to be, like divas or deities or something. Like you've got maybe a fairy or a elven something or whatever you want to call it, nature spirits or, so these could be like regular characters though, for the most part. I don't know why they're in here. That's kind of strange, but there, I thought maybe in the others, let's see, we've got some rocks and things. No, okay, there's nothing animate in there, it doesn't look like. Switch, gate, big monsters. Okay, so maybe that is all that there is in this one. I'm probably remembering from the earlier RPG makers because they have different assets and things. But, yeah. So maybe there's not a whole lot we can put in here. Let me just quickly go through all these and all I'm using is I clicked on one and I'm just using the up and down arrow keys on the keyboard to quickly switch back and forth. So I can kind of visually scan through and see what else we have here. Okay, those are monsters. That's not really what we're looking for. So I don't think we're going to have actual graphics for what I was, what I was thinking. Because I was going to put maybe a squirrel or a bird or something, but I don't see anything like that. I know RPG Maker XP, if you have that version, and that's probably what I'm remembering, to be honest, because it doesn't look like we have any of that here. It has some art assets that come by default for things like that. There'll be I think there's one of a squirrel. I want to say there's a rat or a mouse. I think there's a butterfly one also. So it has some more stuff. So in some ways, and that's a good good segue into something. I'm just going to put a rooster in here for fun. You wouldn't normally find that in the forest necessarily, but for lack of other animal things, for now, just to illustrate the point, I'll just put it in here just to show you. Anyway, but what I was going to say was that the newest RPG Maker is not necessarily the best in certain ways. For a long time, MV included, but VX, VX Ace, and RPG Maker MV, all of those got rid of a feature that was really good from the earlier ones than that, which allowed you to layer maps. So it was probably close to a decade or, maybe even longer since that feature has been in, an RPG Maker. They finally brought it back with the newest one, MZ. So if you want layering, you can get it there. But that might be one reason why you would want to make your game in RPG Maker XP, because maybe you want to use layers on your map, and it's a lot more, I think it's a lot more powerful for being able to make creative maps, being able to have those layers in there, because you can have multiple layers of things. MV tries to do it for you with its automatic feature, but and we see a little bit of that in, for example, the trees when you put them diagonally next to each other and one kind of overlaps the other, or where we kind of overlap the rock a little bit, things like that. In XP and 2003 and things like that, the earlier ones, you have manual control over that, where you can layer things specifically on top of 2 or 3 different layers on top of or behind, things. So if you get used to that, you can make some, much more visually interesting and detailed maps than you can with VX, VX Ace, and RPG Maker MV even. So there are reasons to use the older ones. And there are definitely advantages in some respects. It's not always the newest one is the best by default. So anyway, so back to, sorry for the tangent there, but let's see. So back to our chicken here, rooster, whatever. I think it's, it looks like a rooster. So we just want a little critter, and this isn't anything that the player can talk to. I mean, you could make it so they could talk to the chicken if you want, rooster, whatever. But in this case, I'm just going to make something that's just like around. It'll be there for the player to see, but you're not going to be able to do anything with it necessarily. It's just kind of, visual appeal, whatever. Adding some life to your map a little bit. So here we're going to use this movement box here. We haven't used this one yet. So we picked an image, and we just did that by double clicking on it, finding the one that we want out of here, and then here you just pick what direction you want it to start. And if it doesn't move, then you want to have it stay whatever direction you want it to point. But this one we're going to have it move, so it's okay. So we just click on the spot that we want, and then we hit OK. So here we're just going to do a random type movement. So now if I leave this like this, speed and frequency. So let me just go in here to show this. This is movement speed. Does it say anything for frequency? Frequency. Okay, so it doesn't really tell you that much. But if we just leave it like this, slower. So the options are times 8 slower, times 4 slower, times 2 slower, normal, times 2 faster, and times 4 faster. So that's how fast it will move when it does move. And the frequency is how frequently it will move. So lowest, and so if I just leave it at normal, it's just going to move on occasion. And let me just show you what these are. So the options for walking, we want it to turn on the animation when it's moving. So yes, that's what we want. So when this moves, we want it to animate a little bit. And the animations are just these other, 2 sprite images here. So this is when it's not moving. This is when it's taking one step, and this is when it's taking the other step. And what it does is it just starts here, and it goes basically like this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and it just cycles back and forth between essentially 4 frames, and this one is repeated. So that's how the movement works for sprites and things if you're making your own sprite characters and things like that. So stepping, if we wanted that, so it turns on the animation when the character is not moving. So this is something that you see like a lot of like really old RPGs, like Dragon Quest and some of the early Final Fantasy games and stuff. They would, and sometimes you'll see it in more modern games too, but they would do this where you'll have a character that's like, looks like they're walking in place, even though they're not moving anywhere on the screen. Like they're just constantly walking, and but they're not really going anywhere. So if you check stepping, that's what it'll do. So the rooster would look like it's walking even when it's not moving. And then direction fix, again, if you wanted this to move around without changing what direction it's facing, then you would use direction fix. And so if you had this be something that the player could talk to, for example, and we could put a text box or whatever, normally as you talk to it, it will face the player. So if the player talks to the rooster from up here, it will turn up and look at the player. But if you did direction fix, then you could still talk to it, but it would still face to the right all the time, and it wouldn't move the direction no matter what. So even if it's moving up, it would still be facing to the right, or down, it would still be facing to the right. That's what the direction fix will do. Now through is one that you actually probably were going to use more than you might think. It says makes it possible to move through impassable tiles and characters. So anytime you ever have an event that you want to move places where the player can't move, then you want to use through. So through, the issue with trying to, it's not an issue necessarily, but you may not necessarily want to use this checkbox here, because that will make it so it can move through everything all the time. So if I wanted it to walk through the walls here, like if I put through on, it would be able to walk over here, and it would walk around, and it could go anywhere on this map. Any tile on the map, it's going to ignore the possibility rules of where things normally can and can't walk, and it's just going to be able to walk everywhere. So that's not necessarily ideal for all situations. Things like that can be good. Like, for example, the butterfly that I mentioned previously that's in XP version of RPG Maker. That's a pretty good one that you could just set to move at random, and then you tick the through box to on. Check it so it's on, and then having it fly around everywhere all over the map would make sense. Same with birds, or maybe like a seagull or a crow or something like that that's flying. That would also be able to do that, and it would make sense to be able to move anywhere on the map. But you can also set the movement route in custom, like I was saying before. I think we talked about it briefly, but if you do the custom movement, that will be for something where you can control exactly where it moves. So say I wanted this rooster to go from here to right here, and then when it gets here, have it go back to here. So it would just loop back and forth, right? So if you use custom, you could set that up. You could say move 3 spaces to the right, and then turn up and move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces to the to up, and then stop and turn back around. Anyway, so you would set that path specifically, and we'll look at this more in detail when we actually do it, down the road. But for now, the gist of the idea is that you could set the movement route up specifically. And then how you can use it a little bit more effectively maybe is like during cutscenes or something. Maybe say there was like a rock here or something and the player couldn't pass through, or even this. We can even just use this plant for an example. You could turn through on using the custom movement route sequence. And then if you turn through on temporarily, you could have them walk through this one space that they can't normally walk through. And then when they get to here, you could turn it back off. So then from there, they could do, whatever normal walking, and they wouldn't necessarily be able to go all over the map. It's so there's multiple ways you can use it. But anyway, not that important for right now. We're not doing any through stuff. We just want it to move randomly. But I am going to show you the differences in the speed and the frequency here. So if we want the priority to be the same as a character, so the character can't step on the poor rooster. And the trigger you can leave at action button because there's no contents over. There's nothing happening in this event, so it'll do whatever it does, and that's fine. If you for some reason wanted it to stay still and then wait till the player moved or whatever, then you could do like player touch. If it walks over to it, and then it would walk. I don't know. But it's mostly for these contents inside. So setting a basic movement here, it's just going to do it no matter what, and you can leave that at action button. So I'm just going to hit OK, and then we'll go in here and test it. Save changes, and then I'll show you the differences. I'll come back in and show you the differences between the different movement speeds and frequencies and stuff. So here we have our map, and now you can see the rooster is just kind of moving. Sometimes it'll move in the direction, like when it looks like it stopped, it's probably trying to move down, but it can't because of the possibility rules. So it'll look like it's kind of stuck, but it's not. It's just trying to move up here, and it can't. So it's repeatedly trying to move up here because it's set to random, so it's just going to randomly pick directions to move, and sometimes it picks the same direction a lot of times. So see, there it moved down again. And now if we talk to it and press the button, it's not doing anything, so it's just going to move. And that's kind of what we want. We just wanted something that moves around a little bit, and just it's like, hey, it's life on your map. There's something else here, and it's moving around. And the one thing you got to be careful of, though, is certain times like this, like he was blocking this, so the player wouldn't be able to move forward because the NPC or whatever, the rooster in this case, was in the way. So let's go ahead and close out of the testing. And so one thing you may wish to consider for something like this is to actually make it, instead of same as characters, we can make it below characters. And if we do that, then it means the player can walk over this rooster, but it also means that they're never going to get to a point where the rooster's standing right here and then you can't move and you have to sit and wait for it. So you'll just be able to pass right through it. And I'll go ahead and do one more time just to show you the difference, how that works. just a playtest, and we'll click back in here. And now, if we do this, see, we can walk past it, and it's never going to be in the way to where it's blocking our path. So that's probably the best, the better choice to use for this particular case, because we have such a narrow pathway through here. It's frustrating. You don't want to have an NPC character that's like sitting there blocking your path, and you have to wait, and then they move here, and then they're still in the way, and then they move back down, and you're just like, that's not a fun experience for anybody. So below characters is probably better for a map like this. If it was out here, for example, like if it was just sitting out here, not a big deal to make it, be a at the same level as the character, just like our sign over here, to where you can't walk over it, because then most likely it's not going to be blocking the player's path. So if you have a more wide open area like this, even if it's in the way, the player can just walk around it, and it's no big deal. They've got more space to move around. So take that into consideration as you're doing things like that. So again, let me just show you the differences in the speeds. So times 2 slower. So speed, you got a good sense of how that character moves by default. So that's how any event that you make is going to move by default. So we can do. I'll just show you what happens when you do the frequency. So we'll put that on lowest. I don't have to go through every single one of these and just test it again, but we can show you just a general idea. So it was on normal frequency before, now it's on lowest frequency. So now it's still going to move the same speed, but the amount of times that it moves, how often it actually makes the movement, is way lowered. See, it's like it's barely. Okay, there it did it a little bit, but yeah, see, it takes a long pause there, and it's not really doing that much. So if you want things to move even less frequently, then that's what you do. And that's about as slow as it gets. And then if we do highest, this is kind of like what the player does when they move. So I'll do, save the changes again and go back in and test. So if you want something to be moving pretty much all the time, then you want to use the highest option. That's the point of that. So now see, it's almost constantly moving now. So if you want something to constantly move like that, that's what the highest frequency designation is for. So for something like this, since it's a living thing, and it's not a person, and they're not like going for a specific destination or whatever, I don't think I would use highest. You could leave it like that, and that's fine. And then there's something constantly moving on your screen, and that could be okay. I mean, it's not like it looks terrible to do it that way. But I think it would be a little bit more realistic that maybe it wouldn't be moving constantly. So I would leave that at normal myself. And now let's just look at the speed differences. So times 2 slower, so times 8 slower. So let's just look at that real quick. And I know it's kind of repetitive having to go back in and test and go back in and test, but you'll get used to that too, because that's a lot of what you do. Little changes like this if you want to see how they work. See, there's the slowest possible amount it can move. Now you can see how much slower it's moving to each destination. That's pretty, and that's almost something you could leave if you wanted. If you didn't want it to move that far, you could leave it at that slow. But and then I'll just do one more to show you what so the default is actually times 2 slower. Normal is, I believe, the same speed as the player, if I remember right. But by default, events go a little bit slower than the player. That's why it does times 2 slower. So, but then we can do even faster if we want. So the fastest speed, and I'll just show that. And that's the last one that I'll show you for this, because I know this gets kind of, long-winded. But so then we can see what the fastest speed is, and it's going to just zip right over there. See, it's almost like you blink and you miss it when it's going that fast. So you can make things much faster than the player, even when they're dashing. It's faster than the dash even. It's almost instantaneous. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of things that you can do. for the movement of events, and we'll be using that a bunch later on too. So this is looking pretty good. Let me just change this back to the default setting, ×2 slow, and I think I'll just leave it like that. That looks pretty good for our first little critter. And with that, we will catch up next time, and I think we're going to start making the bigger path area, and that's going to lead into one of our main areas of the game that I have in mind. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you in the next part.